Imagine a winter night where the wind seems to carry forgotten stories across the snow, and a loyal German shepherd stands trembling beneath the lights of a small town arena. In just a few moments, what should have been a joyful K9 showcase will turn into a mystery that changes lives, a reunion no one expected, and a battle against shadows that refuse to stay buried. Before we begin this journey of courage and destiny, tell me where you are watching from and share it in the comments. Your support helps this channel grow, so please press subscribe and stay with us as we follow the footsteps of a hero dog who refuses to be forgotten. Snow fell over North Glen in slow, steady veils, softening the hard edges of the little mountain city until streets, roofs, and lampposts all blurred into one quiet, shimmering canvas of white. The town clung to the side of a ridge, old brick storefronts shouldering up against narrow wooden houses, their windows glowing amber behind frosted glass. Out on the main square beside the courthouse, floodlights carved pale tunnels through the swirling flakes, illuminating a makeshift arena of metal fencing and orange barriers. It was the night of the K9 Winter Showcase, a charity event to raise funds for the rescue teams, who went out when everyone else stayed home. Families sat shoulder to shoulder on snow-dusted bleachers, older women wrapped in wool shawls, children in puffy jackets kicking their boots together to stay warm. The air smelled of snow, pine, and cheap hot chocolate, and for a while the storm felt more like a decoration than a threat. Near the bright rectangle of the arena, Blizzard waited with his handler. Blizzard was a 3-year-old German shepherd, tall and powerfully built, his body a clean line of muscle under a thick coat of black and steel gray. Fresh snow clung to the darker saddle on his back, making him look as if someone had spilled a handful of stars across his fur. His ears stood high and alert, his tail hung low but not timid, and his eyes, pale golden, almost amber, moved with an intent focus that always seemed half a beat ahead of whatever humans were doing. To most of the town, he was just the new K9 dog, transferred in 8 months ago, promising but a bit weird with noise. To the officers who had worked him, there was a different truth. Blizzard could be brilliant and then suddenly gone, not in body, but in mind, his muscles going rigid at certain sounds, his breath hitching as if someone had flipped a switch inside him and sent him back to a moment no one else could see. His handler that evening, Officer Mike Dillard, stood at his side, one gloved hand wrapped around the leash. Mike was in his mid-40s, with the kind of sturdy build that came from years of patrol rather than gym memberships. His shoulders were broad beneath his winter jacket, his waist softening just a little from too much late-night diner food. A neatly trimmed beard framed a face that was more kind than handsome, his brown eyes carrying the worn patience of a man who had seen people at their worst and still chose to talk first, fight last. Mike wasn't a natural showman, but he was steady. He had been given Blizzard's file, the thin, unsatisfying version that called the dog, a reassignment from a discontinued program, and told to make it work. Over the months, he had seen the tremors, the odd freezes at high-pitched sounds, the way Blizzard sometimes stared at a blank wall as if waiting for someone to step out of it. He had logged each incident in careful, measured language, wincing every time he had to write phrases like possible instability or elevated risk. Tonight, he had told himself, would be proof that the dog could hold together when it mattered. Up in a warming tent at the edge of the square, Sheriff Daniel Rowan watched the preparations through a gap in the canvas, his breath a faint cloud in the cold air. Rowan was in his early 50s, tall and narrow-hipped, with a posture that hinted at long-ago days on a basketball court and long drives on mountain roads. His dark hair was threaded with gray at the temples, and his clean-shaven jaw gave him a look of firm, quiet authority. The lines at the corners of his slate-blue eyes spoke of too many late nights and too many decisions that never felt clean. Rowan believed in structure, in doing things by the book, not because he lacked compassion, but because he had seen what happened when people let feelings drive everything. On his desk back at the station lay a draft report, unsigned but waiting. A recommendation that Blizzard be evaluated for euthanasia due to high-risk behavior. The dog hadn't bitten anyone, but the near misses, the unexplained episodes, and the department's thin insurance coverage had all conspired into a single hard paragraph. Rowan hated that paragraph. But if the dog lost control in public, in front of families, he knew exactly how fast that draft would become a signature. In the arena, a young deputy with a bright smile and a portable microphone jogged into the snow. Deputy Tyler Grant was in his late 20s, wiry and energetic, his dark hair mashed flat by a beanie, his cheeks flushed scarlet in the cold. Tyler liked people, liked jokes, and liked being liked. If there was a moment for someone to stand in front of a crowd and keep them cheerful, he would volunteer before anyone finished the sentence. "All right, North Glen," his voice boomed through the speakers, bouncing around the square. "Up next, we have Blizzard and Officer Mike Dillard from our K-9 unit. Blizzard's going to show you some obedience work and then help us with a mock suspect apprehension. Let's give them a warm round of applause, because Lord knows the weather won't." The crowd laughed, clapped, and whistled. Mike led Blizzard into the center of the fenced-off area, snow crunching under his boots. For a few minutes, everything went as planned. Blizzard heeled at Mike's side, responding with precise, almost sharp movements. He sat on command, lay down, rolled his weight smoothly from one position to another, like a dancer hitting marks on a stage. He held a long stay while Mike walked a wide arc around him, his gaze fixed on his handler's face, ignoring the squeals of a toddler in the front row and the gusts of wind that sent fresh snow swirling around his paws. Tyler narrated with light jokes. The crowd relaxed, and even Rowan felt the knot in his chest loosen a notch. Maybe, he thought, the dog just needed time. Then the sound system hiccuped. It was nothing more than a thin squeal of feedback, the sort of glitch people barely noticed at outdoor events. But to Blizzard, it was as if the sky split. His ears snapped backward, then forward. The muscles along his back stiffened. His pupils shrank in his pale eyes. The next moment, Tyler's voice rose louder as he tried to talk over the wind, and one of the speakers crackled again, sending a higher, sharper whine out into the cold night. Somewhere on the bleachers, a metal thermos slipped from someone's mittened hands and clanged against the steel seat with a hollow, ringing bang. For Blizzard, the square, the snow, the bleachers all slid away. The harmless whine from the speaker hooked into some buried thread in his nervous system and yanked. Sound twisted into a siren he remembered too well, a signal that had once meant danger, movement, orders. The clang of the thermos became the slam of a door, the dull report of something heavy striking metal. A smell that wasn't there, chemical, sharp, burned into memory, seemed to bloom under the familiar sense of wool and cocoa. His heart slammed into a higher gear. There was no North Glen anymore, just a narrow corridor of noise and light he could not escape. Mike felt the leash go from loose to iron, hard in a heartbeat. "Easy, boy," he said under his breath, his voice low, the way he'd been taught. Blizzard did not hear him. The MC, eager to spice up the demonstration, hit a cue on his phone, and a pre-recorded siren whooped from the speakers, meant to thrill the children and impress donors. It sliced through Blizzard like a blade. The dog exploded forward. One moment he was at Mike's side, the next he was lunging, all his weight and power at the end of the leash. Pain tore through Mike's right shoulder as the joint wrenched, his boots slipping in the packed snow. He staggered, teeth gritted, almost falling. Blizzard hit the end of the leash and kept pulling, deep growls rising from his chest. Not the controlled barking of a professional K-9 on command, but the raw, panicked sound of an animal fighting invisible enemies. Officers at the perimeter moved in almost as one, a line of dark shapes converging with hands outstretched, voices firm and calm. "Blizzard, sit, down, easy," commands layered over one another. The crowd's laughter had vanished, replaced by a low thrum of uneasy noise. Gasps, murmurs, a child starting to cry. Parents drew their kids back, some rising to their feet. A volunteer, suspect in a bite suit stood frozen near the fence, every instinct screaming at him not to make a sudden move. Sheriff Rowan stepped out fully into the snow, the wind catching the edge of his coat. His gaze fixed on the dog's posture, front feet splayed, back legs braced, body tremoring, eyes darting not toward any single person, but toward the speakers, the lights, the flickers of movement at the edges. This wasn't the focused aggression of a dog chasing a decoy. It was something fractured, jagged, the animal, equivalent of a nightmare you could not wake from. Rowan's mind flicked unwillingly to the folder on his desk, to signatures and liability forms, to the cold calculus the county would demand of him. Near the back of the bleachers, a woman who had been quiet all evening stopped breathing for a moment. Avery Hart had slipped into town a week earlier with 2 small suitcases and a story about needing somewhere quiet for the winter. In her mid-30s, of average height and lean build, she moved with an economy of motion that caught the eye of people trained to notice such things, and passed almost invisibly among those who weren't. Her dark hair was braided and tucked into the collar of a heavy navy coat, the fabric at the elbows and pockets worn to a softer sheen that spoke of long years of use. Her skin was pale from cold rather than fragility, and her mouth, when relaxed, had a natural firmness to it, as if it had learned not to tremble even when it wanted to. But it was her eyes that truly marked her, a clear, cool gray, the color of winter water under thin ice, always moving, always measuring. Avery was polite with townsfolk, but distant. She listened more than she spoke, smiled quickly, but never for long. People assumed she carried some private sadness, widowhood perhaps, or some other quiet tragedy, and then let the assumption stand, because North Glen was full of its own burdens. No one asked too many questions. Avery had told herself she came to the showcase simply to get some air, to see what small towns did for fun. The truth sat heavier in her chest. She had come because of a rumor, a scrap of conversation overheard months ago about a particularly skilled German shepherd relocating to a small mountain county somewhere up north. Hope, for her, had become a painful habit. She did not let herself name what she was looking for as she stood at the back of the bleachers, hands stuffed into her pockets, snow stippling her hair and lashes. Then Blizzard lunged, and his world cracked, and so did hers. While the people around her shrank back from the sight of a large dog apparently losing control, Avery leaned forward. Her fingers gripped the cold metal railing so tightly her knuckles went white. She watched the angle of Blizzard's body, the way his ears flattened not in pure aggression, but in a confused flinch at the sound. She saw the tremor that ran through him, not just of rage, but of fear. Under the growl, she heard a note others could not hear, a question, desperate and lost. For a heartbeat, Blizzard's frantic gaze scanned the crowd without seeing it. Then his eyes passed over Avery and snagged, as if catching on an invisible hook. His whole body went still. The growl strangled down into a strangled, broken sound, half whine, half breath. Snow blew between them in thin curtains, and suddenly the arena, the sirens, the shouts all seemed to mute. Golden eyes locked with gray. The years between that look and the last time it had happened collapsed into nothing. To everyone else, Blizzard was just a dangerous dog staring at a stranger in the crowd. To Avery, the dog in the arena was no stranger at all. In the set of his ears, in the faint scar along the bridge of his nose, in the way his chest rose and fell too fast, and then paused as he recognized something, she felt a name slam into her like a physical blow. Rook. The world tilted. Rook, who had once moved like her shadow. Rook, who had disappeared into red tape and silence. Rook, who was supposed to be gone. Avery's lips parted, but no sound came out. Instinct kept her silent. Training whispered that too many ears were listening, too many eyes watching. Instead, the recognition showed in the sudden rawness of her face, in the way her shoulders sagged for just an instant, as if a weight she had been carrying alone had suddenly shifted. Across the arena, Sheriff Rowan noticed the change on the dog's face, then followed the line of Blizzard's stare to the woman in the back row. He caught only the faintest echo of what passed between them, a flicker of shared history he could not yet name. But it was enough to stir a new thread of unease in him. Blizzard did not lunge again. The leash still trembled in Mike's injured hand, his shoulder throbbing, but the pull had changed. The dog shifted his weight not toward the speakers now, but just a fraction sideways, toward the corner of the bleachers where Avery stood. No one else read that tiny adjustment as anything more than restless movement. Avery read it as something else entirely, a question, a plea, a fragile bridge thrown across a year of forced separation. Her heart answered without words. She held his gaze, steady, unblinking, even as the wind pushed at her and the snow tried to blur them apart. In that breath, in that frozen strip of trampled snow and shifting light, the truth stood up quietly between them. Blizzard was not just Blizzard. He was Rook, lost and renamed, standing in the middle of a winter stage, shaking under a storm no one else could see, until the one person who knew his real name finally found him again. Snow had thickened overnight, softening North Glen into a hushed landscape where the world seemed to breathe slowly, as if wary of disturbing the fragile white cloak draped over roofs and pine trees. Dawn crept into the sky as a pale smear behind layered clouds, lighting the police outpost in a muted gray. The building itself, a squat structure of wood and stone, seemed to shrink beneath the weight of winter, its porch dusted with fresh flakes, footprints of officers charting a restless night of retellings about the K-9 demonstration gone wrong. Inside the station, Deputy Hale waited near the hallway that led to the restricted K-9 wing. Hale was 32, broad-shouldered and compact, with sandy hair clipped close to his head and a jaw that always seemed too stern for his otherwise warm blue eyes. A man who laughed easily but carried loyalty like a blade. He had grown up in North Glen, raised by his grandfather, a retired ranger who taught him two things: never leave a trail unread and never leave a dog behind. Hale lived by both. He wasn't the smartest in the room, but he paid attention, sometimes noticing details others missed simply because he chose to look twice. And last night, when Blizzard had lunged, Hale's eyes had found something no one else saw: the faint imprint on the underside of the dog's collar. A mark, a sigil he didn't recognize. But Avery Hart did, because she had frozen when she glimpsed it, and dogs didn't stare into strangers' souls the way Blizzard had stared at her. Now she approached him, boots leaving crisp prints on the waxed floor, her navy coat still bearing a few stubborn flakes that refused to melt. Avery had barely slept. She wore fatigue not like a burden, but like a companion she had long since learned to carry. Her face was solemn but composed, her gray eyes steady even as tension circled them like faint bruises. She looked like someone who had spent years making herself smaller to survive, and someone who could expand into something formidable if forced. Avery Hart, Hale greeted quietly, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear what he hadn't yet said aloud. Sheriff Rowan doesn't want civilians in the K-9 wing right now, but I think we need to make an exception. Avery didn't smile, but something in her expression softened, as if his words had lifted a weight she didn't dare acknowledge. "You saw the mark," she said. Hale nodded slowly. "Tell me I didn't imagine your reaction." "You didn't." Her voice was low, steady, but Hale heard the fatigue under it, and something else too, a tremor of longing. "I need to see him, or Blizzard, as you call him now." Hale hesitated only a heartbeat before swiping his badge across the security panel. 5 minutes, he whispered. "If Rowan asks, I'll say I needed help verifying a potential lead." He didn't know why he was bending rules for this woman he'd only known a week. But there had been something in her face last night, something that looked like recognition blurred with grief. When the door slid open, the coldness of the K-9 hallway rushed out to meet them. The wing was built of smooth, disinfected stone, stainless steel fixtures, and heavy doors with reinforced glass. A place designed for order, for calm, for clarity. But inside Blizzard's kennel, none of those words applied. The German Shepherd stood at the far corner, body taut but not aggressive, ears twitching at the faint hum of the ventilation system. His fur, thick black and steel gray, shone even under harsh fluorescent light. His pale amber eyes flicked to the door, cautious, alert. He was 3 years old, in prime condition, with the musculature of a dog trained not just for obedience but for precision under pressure. Yet his posture, the way his legs braced, the weight held slightly back, spoke of a fracture deeper than anything visible on his body. Avery stopped several paces from the kennel. She did not rush in, did not call out his name, did not kneel the way ordinary civilians might when greeting a dog. She stilled herself, shoulders aligning, breath slowing. Hale noticed it first. She was making herself non-threatening using techniques only trained handlers knew. "Before I go closer," she murmured, "I need the room quiet." Hale blinked. "Quiet how?" No radios, no metallic clatter, no sudden air currents from the hallway. Her eyes flicked up to his. And no sirens from the lot outside. It was said as calmly as if she were reciting a recipe. Hale didn't question it. He simply moved, turning off a radio, closing the double-sealed door, lowering his voice. Avery approached the kennel now, but not directly. She angled her body sideways, avoiding direct eye contact, her hands open and empty at her sides. She waited for Blizzard to notice her presence, not her face, not her voice, but her smell. The German shepherd stiffened, then slowly lowered his head, nostrils flaring as he breathed her in. Avery exhaled shakily. That was the first sign. Rook had always recognized people by scent before sight. "Something's happening to him," Hale whispered. "He's calmer with you already." "No." Avery's voice trembled, barely audible. "He isn't calmer. He's remembering." Then she gave a single hand signal, 2 fingers up, then curved gently inward. Hale frowned. It wasn't a standard American canine cue, nor any foreign cue he recognized. But Blizzard recognized it instantly. He stopped pacing. His ears snapped forward, his eyes widening not in fear, but fragile, trembling hope. Avery did not reach through the bars yet. She didn't want to trigger panic, but she repeated the gesture, followed by a soft, controlled sound in a language Hale didn't know. It wasn't English. It wasn't anything he'd heard in Northglen. Avery spoke again, melodic, ancient, almost ritualistic, her voice carrying, a resonance that made the hair on Hale's arms rise. Blizzard froze. Then, slowly, the tremor in his legs eased. He crouched slightly, his tail lowering, body folding inward in a posture that was neither submission nor fear, but recognition. "This can't be real," Hale whispered. "People don't just walk up to a broken canine and fix him." "I'm not fixing him," Avery said, her breath shuddering. "I'm giving him something he lost." This time she did kneel, not fully, not vulnerably, but enough to bring her center of gravity down, to speak to him on equal footing. Her voice remained soft, carefully modulated. "Rook," she said, not loudly, not emotionally, but the way one speaks to someone who has been missing for a very long time. "It's me." A whine rose from Blizzard's chest, thin, cracking, half disbelieving. His paws inched forward, claws clicking against the concrete. Hale stared, dumbstruck. He had seen dogs bond deeply with handlers before, but this was different. This was not loyalty. It was longing. Avery lifted her hand at last and placed it flat against the mesh. Rook pressed his muzzle into her palm with a soft, broken sound that made Hale swallow hard. A tremor passed through the dog's shoulders, fear mixed with relief, confusion tangled with the instinctive recognition of someone who had once meant survival, purpose, and safety. "Easy," Avery whispered, switching back to the old language. "I'm here." For the first time since arriving in Northglen, Rook's breathing steadied. His tail did not wag wildly. Instead, it made a single, subtle sweep. The quietest gesture of trust. Hale exhaled, voice barely a breath. "Who are you, Avery?" Her eyes stayed on the dog. Someone who should have never lost him. Before Hale could question further, Sheriff Rowan appeared at the end of the hall, tall, rigid, jaw tight. His tone was curt, edged with authority and something like disbelief. "What exactly is going on here?" Avery slowly stood, keeping her body between Rowan and Rook, though she didn't touch the dog again. Hale opened his mouth, but Rowan lifted a hand, stopping him. "I need answers," Rowan said. "Why is Blizzard, Rook you say, responding to you? And what was that language?" Avery met his gaze with quiet resolve. "Give me time, and I'll explain everything, but first, let me stabilize him. You saw last night. If I walk away now, you'll lose him." Rowan's jaw flexed. He wanted to say no. Every protocol screamed at him to say no. But he had eyes. He had seen the impossible, and he had heard the recommendation waiting on his desk. 5 minutes, he said finally. Nothing more. Avery nodded, her throat tightened, but she didn't let emotion overtake her. For Rook's sake, she couldn't. She turned back to the dog, Blizzard no longer, at least not in this room, and pressed her forehead gently to the mesh. Rook closed his eyes, and in that fragile, stolen moment, the fracture inside him eased just a little. The storm outside howled against the walls, rattling windows like restless ghosts. But inside the K9 wing, another storm had quieted, because the person Rook had been waiting for, the one he had never stopped searching for in the strange new world he was forced into, had finally stepped between the two winds and found him. And every officer watching knew, without understanding why, that something in the room had just shifted, the beginning of a truth none of them were ready for. Snowstorm winds battered the windows of North Glen's K9 wing, as if the winter itself wanted to pry into the conversation about to unfold. Morning had fully risen now, though the sky remained the same dim slate color, the sun a rumor behind thick clouds. Sheriff Rowan led Avery and Deputy Hale into a small briefing room adjacent to the kennels, its walls lined with faded posters about obedience training and emergency protocols. A single strip of fluorescent light hummed overhead, cold and expressionless. Avery stood near the table, hands clasped together, her breath still uneven from the encounter with Rook. Rowan watched her with the wary patience of a man who had balanced his career on details, and could sense when he was standing in the middle of a detail big enough to break him. "Start talking," Rowan said, though the words weren't harsh. They were steady, controlled. "Everything." Avery didn't sit. She remained standing, as if sitting would somehow anchor her to a truth she had spent the past year trying not to answer. "No lies," she whispered. "Not anymore." Deputy Hale closed the door, leaning back against it. His eyes, gentle, cautious, stayed fixed on Avery. "You said his name before." "Rook." Avery exhaled, a long breath that left her shoulders slumped for a moment. "Yes. Blizzard is not his original name. He was Rook. And before you ask, not just a K9, not just a patrol dog. Rook served in a highly classified chemical trace pursuit unit, my unit." Rowan frowned, arms crossing over his chest. "Chemical trace? Like narcotics?" "No." Avery's gray eyes sharpened, shadows flickering across them like passing storms. "Worse. We tracked molecules that shouldn't exist outside of black market labs. Volatile compounds used for advanced explosives, biochemical triggers, rare synthetic compounds designed to vanish after deployment. Rook wasn't trained to chase criminals. He was trained to chase ghosts in the air." Hale blinked. "But Blizzard, Rook, was listed as a reassignment from a discontinued program." "And that," Avery said with the quiet intensity of truth breaking free, "is only half a sentence carved out of an entire classified page." Rowan's jaw tightened. "So why erase him? Why hide all this?" "Because the mission went wrong." Avery's voice stiffened. "Spectacularly wrong." She stepped closer to the table, palms pressing against its cold surface as if grounding herself. "1 year ago, my team was deployed in Eastern Europe. A suspected weapons broker was circulating a compound believed to be a precursor for a silent detonation device. Something that leaves barely any trace but can take out entire structures. Rook picked up the signature of the compound on one man, a man named Marlowe Creed. Rowan stilled, the name cutting the air like a blade. "Creed? As in the same Creed our intel unit flagged last month." "The same," Avery confirmed. "Though you wouldn't find it in public records. Creed doesn't appear unless he wants to appear, and when he does, it's because he already planned the exit route. He's the kind of man who builds his empire on vanishing tracks." "What happened to your team?" Hale asked, voice low. Avery swallowed hard, her throat bobbing with memory. For a moment she looked older, not in years, but in grief. "We were ambushed," she said simply. "A professional strike. They knew our route, our timing, even our extraction instructions. The official report said I died in the collapse of a warehouse wall. My commander ordered the record sealed, declared my death a classified casualty to avoid diplomatic fallout." "But you lived," Rowan murmured. "Barely." Avery lifted the sleeve of her coat slightly, revealing scars. Old, pale, too clean, and too straight to come from anything but structural collapse and surgical reconstruction. "I crawled out. Rook did too, and when support finally came," her voice trembled, "they didn't rescue him. He was taken." Rowan's eyes darkened. "Taken by who?" Avery shook her head. "I don't know, but someone tampered with his identity. His chip number was altered, his file rewritten. Then he was transferred into the civilian K9 program as Blizzard. His past was scrubbed cleaner than mine." Hale rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Why would Creed care about a dog?" "Because Rook is evidence," Avery said. "Creed carried the compound that night. Rook detected it. He alerted. That alone is enough to tie Creed to manufacturing an illegal explosive precursor. Rook is a biological key. He holds the memory of Creed's chemical trail. And Creed wants every living trace of that memory gone. The room fell silent except for the distant whistle of the storm. Rowan finally spoke. "So you're telling me Blizzard, Rook, could bring Creed down?" "Yes." Her voice steadied. "If he testifies through chemical identification, if we can retrieve the residual markers he trained on, if we can trace the sequence, but only if he lives long enough." "And he almost didn't," Rowan said quietly. "We were close to signing euthanasia protocols." Avery closed her eyes, pain rippling across her features. He wasn't broken. He was traumatized without the one person he trusted. Dogs like Rook are trained to lock onto a handler's scent, voice, heartbeat variation. Remove that anchor, and you remove the map they use to navigate the world. "And now that anchor is back," Hale added, watching her with a mix of awe and concern. "Yes," Avery whispered, "but temporarily. He's stabilizing, but he's not whole yet. And if Creed's men find us, if they're already here, Rook will be targeted again." Rowan leaned forward. "Do you have proof Creed is coming?" Avery hesitated. It was the kind of hesitation Rowan had learned to read after. Decades in law enforcement? Not uncertainty, but fear of confirming something devastating. "An unmarked vehicle followed me the night I arrived in Northglen," she admitted. "Different plates each day, same rhythm, same distance. And last night, in the crowd, someone else noticed Rook's reaction to the sirens. He shouldn't have, not unless he knew what that reaction meant." Hale swore under his breath. "So we're already compromised." "We might be," Avery said. "I can't be sure." Rowan took a measured breath. "All right, tell me the rest. What exactly happened the night your file said you died?" Avery's jaw tightened. She looked toward the frosted window, as if expecting to see her past standing there, tapping on the glass. "There was intelligence," she said. "False intelligence, though we didn't know it at the time. A meeting point, a supposed handoff. My team entered an abandoned shipping warehouse. Rook identified the compound instantly. He alerted, then pivoted east toward a staircase. That was the moment the explosives went off. Not enough to destroy the building, just enough to collapse the east wing and bury us alive." Her voice wavered. "My unit didn't make it. I was the only one who crawled out. And Rook, hurt but alive, refused to leave me. He stayed with me until retrieval crews came." Hale frowned. "So, how did they separate you two?" Avery looked away. "Someone drugged me during medical transport. When I woke up, I was told Rook didn't survive. I believed them until whispers started surfacing that a highly trained shepherd with incomplete documentation had shown up in a civilian K-9 program. It was improbable, suspicious. And then I saw footage of him training, just one clip, but it was enough." "You recognized him?" Rowan asked. "Of course I did. He has a microscar above his right paw from crawling out of the rubble, and his left ear tilts by 2 degrees when he's processing new sound patterns. I trained him from 8 months old. I know every breath he takes." Rowan's voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "And you've been searching for him since?" "Yes." Her voice cracked, only slightly. "Finding him was the only thing keeping me moving." Hale shifted, swallowing hard. "So, what do we do now?" Avery looked at Rowan with steady determination, steel beneath the exhaustion. "Now we rebuild him, quietly, carefully, and you let me work with him. Not as a visitor, as his handler." Rowan opened his mouth to respond, but the speaker above the door crackled to life. A voice from the front desk. "Sheriff, we have a situation. The exterior cameras just picked up a vehicle circling the back lot twice, not local plates." Avery went still. Hale stiffened. Rowan's eyes sharpened. "Description?" Rowan barked into the intercom. "Black SUV, tinted windows." Driver stepped out briefly, scanned the K-9 entrance, then got back in. Avery's breath caught. "It's starting," she whispered. "They're looking for him." Rowan stared at her, then at Hale. "Seal the building," he ordered. "Now!" As alarms whispered through silent corridors and officers scrambled into motion, Avery turned toward the K-9 wing door, her chest tightening with protective instinct. Rook was no longer just the dog she lost. He was the key Creed wanted to erase. And the storm outside was no longer just weather. It was cover. The storm rolled deeper into North Glen, as though winter itself were tightening its grip around the small mountain town. By mid-afternoon, snow had risen to the height of car tires, swept in restless curls by the wind. The sky was a thick, unbroken gray, smothering the sun and draining the world of warmth. Floodlights around the police station flickered occasionally under the barrage of ice, but inside, everything felt far too still. Sheriff Rowan stood in the monitoring room, the glow of surveillance screens casting blue shadows across his face. He hadn't slept. The tension in his shoulders pulled his posture taut, giving him the appearance of a man bracing for an impact he could already sense approaching. The earlier report about the circling SUV had set every nerve in him on edge. Now, as he scanned camera feeds one by one, he felt a tight coil of anticipation winding in his chest. Deputy Hale entered behind him, brushing snow from his jacket. "Perimeter's secure," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "Officers are doing continuous sweeps." Rowan nodded, eyes fixed on the screens. "It won't stay quiet, not after what Avery told us." Hale hesitated. "Do you believe her?" Rowan sighed. "I believe the dog believed her, and that's enough to make me worry." As if on cue, Blizzard Rook appeared on one of the kennel cameras, pacing along the mesh wall of his enclosure. His body was tense, head turning sharply at every distant noise, ears flicking like radar dishes catching invisible signals. He wasn't panicked, not the way he had been during the showcase, but he was alert, on edge, as though he sensed a disruption that hadn't yet entered the room. Dogs like him didn't react to shadows. They reacted to threats. Rowan leaned closer to the screens. Then something shifted on camera 12. An angle pointed toward the back entrance of the station. A figure appeared. A man stood at the gated rear lot, snow swirling around him in thick curtains. He wore a heavy winter coat, hood pulled low, but the way he moved, measured steps, steady posture, was too controlled for an ordinary visitor. He held papers in one gloved hand, as if he had simply come for routine business. Yet the security system registered no appointment under his name. Rowan frowned. "Who is that?" Hale typed rapidly at the computer. "ID scan shows the name Daniel Morris. Looks legal, but..." Hale froze as the screen flashed red. "Sheriff, there's no Morris on today's approved visitor list." The man reached the gate and paused, surveying the row of external cameras. His gaze didn't drift like someone confused. He looked at each camera too directly, counting them, mapping them. Rowan's heartbeat kicked into a faster rhythm. "Where's Avery?" "In the K9 wing," Hale answered quickly. "She's working with Rook." "Good," Rowan murmured, though something cold settled in his gut. "On the monitor." The man stepped closer to the building, stopping near the side wall where the ventilation ducts fed into the K9 wing. Snow clung to his boots, and when he lifted his head enough for the camera to catch his face, Rowan saw sharp, angular features, cheekbones defined, jaw square, eyes an unnerving pale blue. His hair, barely visible under the hood, appeared blonde or light brown. His expression was neither impatient nor confused. It was calculating. Something about the man radiated precision, the kind Rowan had seen in mercenaries or specialists who'd spent years training their instincts into weapons. A professional, not a drifter, not a lost visitor. The man traced the wall with gloved fingers, pausing at the panel that controlled the exterior alarm wiring. He wasn't touching it to admire the structure. He was assessing entry points. Hale inhaled sharply. "Sheriff, he's scouting." Rowan didn't answer immediately. His pupils constricted as he studied the stranger's every movement. "Zoom in." The camera tightened on the man just as he glanced up, directly into the lens, as though aware he was being watched. And he smiled. Not a pleasant smile, a knowing one. A moment later, he turned and walked out of view. But Rowan knew that wasn't departure. That was reconnaissance. "Lock down the building," Rowan said quietly, "and bring Avery to me." In the K9 wing, Avery was kneeling beside Rook's kennel, whispering steadying words in the old coded language they had once used in the field. Rook pressed his weight against the mesh, not whining, just remaining close enough to feel the vibration of her voice. The moment Hale entered, Rook's ears perked, nostrils flaring. "He's picking up something," Avery said, rising to her feet. "What happened?" Hale's expression told her enough. "Sheriff wants you." They walked quickly toward the monitoring room. Avery moved like someone who'd spent years navigating dangerous corridors, not running, not panicking, but calculating steps with contained urgency. When they entered, Rowan motioned her over wordlessly and replayed the security footage. The moment the stranger's face appeared on screen, Avery's breath caught. She didn't recognize the man precisely, but she recognized the type: cold, surgical, mission-oriented. The kind of operative Creed hired to erase loose ends. Rowan watched her closely. "Tell me what I'm looking at." "A scout," Avery whispered. "He's assessing access routes to the K-9 wing. He knows exactly where Rook is. Creed must have informed him." "Could he have been the one watching you when you came to town?" Rowan pressed. "Possibly. Creed doesn't send amateurs." Hale frowned. "He showed legal papers at the gate. He didn't try to break in." "That's because he wasn't ready," Avery said. "He was confirming the layout, checking cameras, timing, rotations. He'll come back, but not alone, and not in daylight." Rowan's jaw tightened. "That's what I was afraid of." He turned to Avery fully now, his voice lower, his authority sharpened by urgency. "You told us Rook is the key to Creed. I need the rest of the truth, and I need it now." Avery hesitated, not because she was hiding anything further, but because saying the words out loud made them real in a way she wasn't prepared for. Rowan leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "If we're going to protect this town, this dog, and you, I need to know what Creed is capable of, and what he wants." Avery's throat tightened. For a moment she looked like she might deflect, but then she straightened her shoulders, steeling herself. "All right," she said softly. "You want the full truth? You'll get it." She moved to the screen showing the stranger. The wind was still blowing against him in the paused footage, swirling flakes around his boots. "Marlowe Creed doesn't just sell illegal technology," Avery began. "He manufactures, distributes, and removes every witness who could expose him. He's built an empire on erasing people. And the night my team died, Rook picked up a rare chemical marker used in his latest prototype explosion system." Rowan exchanged a glance with Hale. "If that marker is documented," Avery continued, "it ties Creed directly to international arms violations and multiple deaths. No more gray areas. No more hiding behind shell corporations." "And Rook remembers it," Hale murmured. "Yes, even after trauma and reassignment, his neural scent mapping remains. Creed knows this." Avery pointed at the stranger. "That's why he's here." Rowan's voice hardened. "And what does he want?" "Rook dead," Avery whispered. "And me, if he realizes I survived." A cold silence swept through the room, like a second winter. Even the hum of electronics felt distant. Hale broke the silence first. "Sheriff, we should evacuate Avery and move Rook to a secure facility." "No," Avery cut in sharply. "That's exactly what Creed wants. A transfer creates vulnerability. A convoy on snowy roads is easy to ambush. Here, at least, we control the environment." Rowan studied her. "You think we can hold against Creed?" "No," Avery said honestly. "Not if he sends a full team. But this scout isn't reporting back information we can't use. His presence tells us something important." "And what's that?" Rowan asked. Avery turned toward the window, watching the snow slam against the glass. "That Creed is close enough to smell fear," she whispered, "but not close enough yet to know we're ready for him." Rowan nodded slowly, mind already moving through tactical scenarios. "We fortify the station, coordinate with county patrols, and no one gets near Rook without my clearance." Avery breathed out shakily. "Then we might have a chance." As Rowan prepared orders and Hale moved out to alert the others, Avery lingered before the screen one last time, studying the stranger's cold smile. She felt Rook's absence beside her like a pressure in her chest. He had been taken from her once. She wouldn't let it happen again. Beyond the window, the storm screamed against the mountains, and somewhere out in that white wilderness, Creed's shadow was moving. The storm reached its full fury by nightfall, turning North Glen into a labyrinth of white noise. Snow whirled in frantic spirals. carried by winds sharp enough to slice through layers of wool and resolve. The town lay buried under drifts that erased sidewalks and blurred the outlines of homes, transforming everything into a shifting wilderness. Even the streetlights flickered as though afraid to hold their glow too long in such a night. Inside the police station, tension sat thick in the air. Officers moved quietly down hallways, communicating in clipped whispers. Sheriff Rowan remained stationed near the operations board, marking patrol paths on a map with red ink. Deputy Hale monitored cameras, his foot tapping with nervous energy he couldn't dispel. Avery stood by the reinforced door of the K9 wing, staring through the narrow window at Rook. The dog paced with deliberate steps, nose twitching at every vibration. The storm didn't frighten him, but something in the air set his instincts on edge, as though the wind itself carried warning. A faint buzz sounded at the security desk. "Sheriff," Hale called out. "We've got another camera alert. Rear entrance." Avery stiffened. Rowan strode forward. The screen showed a dark figure moving fast beneath the whipping snow. Hood low, shoulders squared, cutting a precise path toward the K9 wing. "That's him," Avery whispered. "The scout from earlier." "How the hell did he get past the patrol cars?" Hale muttered. "He didn't," Avery said. "He avoided them." The man reached the emergency door, produced tools with swift precision, and bypassed the exterior lock in under 6 seconds. Rowan cursed. "He's breaching!" But before anyone could react further, the internal alarm blared, a deep, throbbing tone that sent Rook barking low and sharp. Avery's instincts snapped into place. He's not alone. The break-in is a distraction. Hale looked at her, confused. A distraction for what? Avery's face went pale as realization hit. For taking Rook. Rowan didn't waste time. "Move." Avery, Hale, and Rowan sprinted toward the K9 wing. Snow sprayed from the cracked doorway as the three burst through, boots hammering against concrete. They reached the kennels just as Rook growled, a deep, resonant sound Avery hadn't heard since their field days. His body was low, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the shadows pooling near the auxiliary exit. A second figure stepped into the light. Unlike the scout, this one wasn't slender or surgical. He was tall, broad, wrapped in a heavy coat lined with ballistic plating. His face was covered except for his eyes, cold, calculating, empty. He carried a black duffel bag, too rigidly shaped to be anything but equipment. "Back away from the dog!" Rowan barked, gun drawn. The intruder didn't move. Instead, he lifted a small silver tube no longer than his palm. Avery's heart plummeted. "Gas! Dispersal device! Everyone out!" Before they could retreat, the man slammed the tube against the floor. A hiss filled the air as vapor burst upward. Not toxic, but blindingly disorienting. Rook snarled and lunged against the kennel mesh. The intruder moved through the haze with terrifying confidence. He opened the duffel and withdrew a sealed packet, its contents glowing faintly purple through the plastic. Hale's breath caught. "What is that?" "A chemical scrambler," Avery said, covering her mouth. "It erases scent memory. Creed wants to destroy Rook's ability to identify him." Through the fog, the intruder reached the kennel gate, and Rook reacted. The German shepherd exploded forward the moment the lock clicked. He burst from the kennel like a force of nature. No panic, no disorientation, only instinct sharpened by training burned deep into his bones. He lunged, jaws snapping at the intruder's wrist, forcing him to drop the scrambler. But the man fought with equal precision. He twisted, seized Rook's collar, and attempted to slam the dog to the ground. Avery charged forward, but Rowan grabbed her arm. "He's not trying to kill Rook. He's trying to subdue him." "That's worse," Avery hissed. "If they take him, he's gone." Rook broke free and hurtled toward the auxiliary door. He didn't flee. He was tracking something outside, something stronger than the chemical fog. "The second attacker," Avery whispered. "He's moving toward Frosthaven Lake." Rowan cursed. "Why the lake?" "Isolation," Avery said. "Less police visibility, and sound disappears in snow." Hale swung open the emergency exit. "Then we follow him." Avery didn't wait for permission. She ran. The world outside was a blur of white and wind. As Avery sprinted through the storm, her breath tore at her lungs, each inhale sharp as broken glass. Rook's paw print stamped a clear line through the thickening snow, leading downhill toward the frozen lake on the outskirts of the town. Deputy Hale struggled to keep pace. "This is insane! We can't see 10 feet ahead." Avery didn't slow. Rook can. Rowan kept close behind, his silhouette a dark shape against the blizzard. "If Creed's men set charges, that's why we can't wait," Avery shot back. "He's not after the dog, he's after the evidence." The lake appeared suddenly, a flat expanse of ice glowing faintly beneath the storm, illuminated by a single distant lantern placed in the snow. A trap. Rook skidded to a stop on the lake's edge. The second intruder stood in the center of the ice sheet, duffel bag beside him, a detonator in one hand. His coat flapped violently in the wind. He was smaller than the first attacker, wiry but agile, with sharp movements that suggested specialized training. Avery recognized the stance instantly. "Demolition expert," she said under her breath. "He's going to destroy the documents." The man knelt and unzipped the bag, revealing a stack of encrypted folders and a digital drive, evidence tying Marlowe Creed to chemical weapons. Hale murmured, horrified, "If he blows that, then everything dies with it," Avery finished. The man raised the detonator, and Rook moved. With a roar of pent-up fury, the German shepherd charged across the ice. His paws barely slipped. His body remained low, angled with perfect precision. He wasn't attacking. He was executing a technique Avery had drilled into him hundreds of times, a weapon arm lock designed to neutralize threats without killing. The intruder pivoted, struggling to press the trigger. Rook launched, his jaws clamped around the man's wrist, twisting sharply. The detonator flew from the man's grip, skittering across the ice. But momentum carried both of them toward a spiderweb crack near the lake's center. Avery screamed, "Rook, disengage!" He obeyed instantly, releasing and leaping sideways as the ice groaned beneath the intruder's weight. Deputy Hale and Rowan sprinted forward, sliding across the ice to tackle the man before he could reach the detonator. Hale cuffed him while Rowan retrieved the evidence, securing it against his chest as if it were fragile treasure. The red and blue lights of approaching patrol cars flashed through the snow, casting eerie reflections across the frozen lake. Avery reached Rook first. He trotted toward her, chest heaving, eyes bright but soft. When she knelt, he pressed his head against her shoulder, trembling, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a year-long fracture finally mending. Avery wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his fur. "I've got you," she whispered over and over. "I've got you, boy." Rook nuzzled into her coat, letting out a soft, fragile whine. The storm howled above them, but for a moment, Avery felt only warmth. Behind them, Rowan radioed in. "Suspect in custody, documents recovered, prepare federal transfer." And with that, the night bled red with police sirens reflecting off snow, signaling the first victory in a long war, one fought not with armies, but with a handler and the dog who had never stopped trying to return to her. Morning arrived slowly in North Glen, as though the sky itself were hesitant to reveal that the long night had finally ended. Pale light seeped across the snowfields, turning the drifts into quiet waves of silver blue. The storm had broken hours earlier, leaving behind a stillness so complete that even the wind seemed afraid to disturb it. Inside the police station, the heat from the radiators created a thin veil of fog along the windows, softening the hard edges of the world outside. Avery stood in one of the hallways, shoulders wrapped in a heavy blanket someone had insisted she take. She looked exhausted, but deeply, quietly alive, her gray eyes softer now, their constant vigilance eased by the presence of the dog resting beside her. Rook lay with his head on her boot, breathing evenly, eyelids flickering slightly as if he were dreaming. His coat, brushed clean of ice and dirt, gleamed again in its familiar pattern of black and steel gray. Every so often, when someone passed by, his ears twitched, but he didn't rise. He didn't need to. Avery was there, and that was enough. Deputy Hale walked down the hall, a cup of steaming coffee in each hand. "You two look like a painting," he said quietly. "Something out of those old winter story books." Avery accepted the cup with a grateful nod. "I'm just glad he can sleep," she said, her voice hushed so as not to disturb the dog. "He earned it," Hale replied. Then, almost reluctantly, "So did you." Before Avery could respond, footsteps echoed from the operations room. Sheriff Rowan appeared, wearing a rare expression, something between relief and disbelief, softened by the warmth of morning light. "Avery," he said, motioning for her. "They're here." She rose carefully so as not to wake Rook fully. He stirred, stretching, then nudged her thigh with his nose, following her with practiced loyalty. When they reached the main conference room, several federal agents stood in crisp suits, frost still melting from their coats. The FBI insignia gleamed on their lapels. A large evidence case sat open on the table, containing the folders, chemical samples, and encrypted drive recovered from the lake the previous night. One of the agents, Special Agent Carla Whitmore, a woman in her 40s with stern eyes and a calm, authoritative presence, turned toward Avery. "You're Avery Hart," she said. "We owe you more than we can put into a report." Avery shook her head. "You owe Rook, not me." Whitmore's gaze shifted to the German shepherd. Rook stood tall beside Avery's leg, amber eyes steady, tail hanging in a composed arc. Not aggressive, not fearful, simply aware, as if he understood the weight of the room. "We ran overnight verification on the scent capture records from his original unit," Whitmore continued. "The molecular markers he alerted to during your last mission match the compound found on Creed's equipment." Rowan exhaled slowly. Hale whispered, "Then it's official." Whitmore nodded. "Marlowe Creed is now a federal fugitive. A warrant has been issued nationwide. Task forces are already mobilizing." Avery lowered her head, letting the weight of the announcement sink in. She had dreamed of justice, but justice had always felt too far away, too buried under lies, manipulation, and erased files. But now, because Rook survived, because he remembered what the world had tried to make him forget, Creed would finally be hunted. Another agent stepped forward, holding a slim tablet. "We also finished our behavioral assessment of the K9. He glanced down at the screen. "Our conclusion? Rook is not dangerous, not unstable. His reactions were trauma-induced, not aggression-based. With proper reconnection to his handler," he nodded at Avery, "he shows full operational control." Rowan's shoulders dropped in relief. For months he had carried the dread of potentially authorizing the euthanasia of a dog he suspected wasn't truly broken. Hearing the truth now felt like being allowed to breathe for the first time in weeks. Hale let out a low whistle. "Guess that report on your desk is good for shredding, Sheriff." Rowan gave a rare, crooked smile. "I'll personally burn it." Rook's tail swept once across the floor, as though approving. Whitmore turned back to Avery. "We also reviewed your classified file. You were never meant to disappear. Your death record was used to suppress the investigation. We can reinstate your credentials." Avery inhaled sharply, words caught in her throat. She had walked alone, truly alone, for so long that the idea of being recognized again felt almost unreal. "I don't know if I'm ready for the field," she admitted quietly. "We're not asking you to return to it." Whitmore exchanged a brief look with Rowan. But Sheriff Rowan suggested something else. Rowan stepped closer, crossing his arms thoughtfully. "North Glen and the entire Silver Ridge County are upgrading their K9 program. After what we've seen, your expertise is beyond anything we have. We want you to serve as a special K9 consultant, train our handlers, modernize our program. No undercover missions, no disappearing acts. Just real, honest work with dogs and the people who depend on them." Hale grinned. "And you'd be staying here, with Rook." Avery looked down at the German shepherd. He stared back up at her as if the decision were already made. She rubbed behind his ear, a gesture familiar between them, echoing years that had been stolen. "I'd like that," she whispered. Whitmore closed the case, satisfied. "Then I believe our business here is done. We'll take custody of the suspect and the evidence. Expect updates over the coming week." As the agents departed, Rowan motioned for Avery and Rook to follow him to the main entrance. "There's something else you should see," he said. When they stepped outside, the cold air wrapped around them like crystal. The storm had left the town dazzling, snow piled in perfect waves, icicles hanging like glass ornaments from eaves, sunlight stretching soft, golden fingers across rooftops. A crowd had gathered near the town square, Officers, townsfolk, rescue volunteers, huddled in warm coats, faces bright with anticipation. A makeshift stage had been set up, decorated with simple pine branches and red ribbons. Hale leaned over. Word travels fast in a small town. Rowan took the stage and cleared his throat. Last night, he began, North Glen faced a threat none of us expected. But because of bravery, both human and canine, we stand here safe. And because of truth finally brought into the light, justice is now in motion. He gestured for Avery to join him. Applause rose, warm and full, drifting over the snow like a blessing. Avery stepped up slowly, humbled, her breath visible in white plumes. And this, Rowan continued, is Rook, a dog who was once nearly discarded, now recognized for what he truly is. A special operations K9, whose service continues to protect not just one town, but our entire county. Rook sat proudly, ears high, gaze steady. The crowd erupted with cheers. Today, Rowan said, we restore his rightful title. He placed a new emblem on Rook's collar, a polished insignia bearing his original code name. Rook lifted his head, the sunlight catching the insignia, so it glimmered like a shard of dawn. Then Rowan turned to Avery. And we welcome Avery Hart as our new special consultant for the Silver Ridge K9 division. More applause. Avery knelt beside Rook, pressing her forehead gently to his. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "No one will take you away again. Not now. Not ever." Rook's tail thumped softly in the snow. Snowflakes drifted from the quiet morning sky, landing on Rook's back like tiny flecks of light, each one a symbol not of winter's cold, but of something reborn, warm and bright and hopeful. A new chapter, for him, for her, for both of them. In the quiet closing of this winter story, we are reminded that the miracles of God do not always arrive with thunder or bright signs. Sometimes they come through the loyalty of a dog who refuses to give up, through the courage of a woman who chooses truth over fear, and through the gentle strength that God places in every heart willing to protect and to love. In our own lives, we all face cold seasons, moments of doubt, loneliness, or uncertainty. But God walks beside us even then, guiding our steps and sending help in ways we may not expect. If this story touched your spirit, please share it with someone who may need hope today, and leave a comment to tell us your thoughts. Type Amen. If you believe in the quiet miracles God sends into our lives, may God bless you and your loved ones with peace, protection, and strength. And please remember to support the channel by pressing subscribe so we can continue bringing stories of faith, compassion, and redemption.